Well, good day there. This is Joe Van Cleef, and welcome to another episode of the Typewriter video series. Today's episode is going to continue with the same theme that we started in last episode, which is a review, one at a time, of every typewriter in my collection. And today's episode will be covering the Olivetti Underwood 21. Stay tuned. So a few years ago, I was walking around in the U&M part of Albuquerque, and I noticed a little thrift store that I'd never been to before. And I walked in it one morning, and I saw this case sitting on the floor of this little junky thrift shop. And I knew immediately from looking at it, it was a typewriter, but I didn't recognize from the case what it was. But it's a nice hard case, nice handle, little latch. It has some metal feet on the bottom, which is kind of nice. And so, of course, the case right now is empty. It has a nice, kind of a felt-lined interior, and it has these hard plastic rails with little feet for the feet of the typewriter. And there is a little insert in the back here with some original typing paper. And it says, case and typewriter made in Olivetti plant, Barcelona, Spain. And in this case was these two brochures. One was called Type Right Away, and this was made by Remington Rand. This was a booklet by Remington Rand, and I suspect, obviously it didn't come shipped with the typewriter, but maybe the store who the owner of the typewriter bought it from, they might have gotten it from the typewriter shop. Anyways, this is the Underwood 21 brochure. And if you open it up here, it has a neat little layout of the typewriter, and it describes all the features in typical Olivetti fashion. And now what's also interesting about it is on the back of the brochure is a sales receipt. So let me tell you the story about the typewriter. So the lady who owned the thrift store told me this story. The gentleman who brought the typewriter into the thrift store was the owner of the typewriter himself. And he said that he came to New Mexico in the late 1960s on a motorcycle from back east. So he rode a motorcycle cross-country in the late 1960s to New Mexico, and he traded his motorcycle for this typewriter because he wanted to be a writer. So I thought it was kind of a cute story. I wasn't sure if it was true, but I figured, well, at the very least, maybe the owner of the thrift store was trying to sell me the typewriter with this enticing story. Well, when I got the typewriter home, and I was looking through the case, as I showed you in the brochure, was this receipt. And the receipt is from Nichols Business Machines Incorporated, 5204 Lomas Northeast in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the receipt is dated 2/29/1968. Now, February 29th. So this was a leap year. This was leap year day, that 29th day of February. And it says Frank's Auto Service, and it says exchange, and there's a receipt number for another receipt number. What do you know? I think the story pans out. This typewriter was exchanged between, and the motorcycle was an exchange deal between Frank's Auto Service and Nichols Business Machines. So I know Nichols Business Machines was a typewriter shop in Albuquerque because I've seen their label on other machines that I've found in my town, but that was a very cool story, so there is some provenance to it. Let's take a look at the typewriter. And this is the Olivetti Underwood 21. So it is a gray and kind of gunmetal-ish blue typewriter, medium-sized. Actually the grayness has a very, very slight green color. I wouldn't call it olive green, but some kind of a real slight greenish color. And if my monitor on the camera, it looks fairly accurate. Hopefully it will be on the video you're seeing. The back plate says Olivetti Underwood, made in Olivetti plant, Barcelona, Spain, as is indicated by the case itself. So as you know, these are very similar to the Olivetti Studio 44 as far as being the internal chassis. That's what I've been understood to believe. So it has the folding carriage return lever. The paper, I should say the line spacing lever, is just a little metal protrusion, and I don't know if there was originally a plastic piece that went on this, but what I have right now is just a piece of metal. So it might be missing that. I haven't really figured that out. So the keyboard, it has these little keys that, I don't know if these are the kind of keys that people tend to call Tombstone keys, and they're kind of shaped like fingernail shaped. They're flat on the back edge and they're kind of oval shaped on the front. And it doesn't have the number 1 key, so it's just 2 through 0. And it has a typical American style keyboard. The $ is shifted 4. And you have your quarter, half, ampersand, I should say, a cent, backspace key, plus and equals. And in the upper left corner of the keyboard, this unmarked key is going to be your margin release lever. This key enables you to move the carriage beyond either the left or the right margin. This is your tab set and clear lever, and your tab button is typical Olivetti style, the reddish colored key over there, space bar, etc. So this is a great medium-sized typing machine. I've really enjoyed it. Let me look to have you take a look underneath the machine. The type bars, that area is exposed, but the chassis part where the mechanicals are is covered with a plate that removes with 4 screws, and the little rubber rectangular feet engage in those little holes in the base of the carrying case itself. And also, I mentioned to you earlier the tab set and clear lever. It's this lever right here. The way it works is if you want to set a tab, you move the carriage to the position where you want to set it and you push the lever away from you. To clear a tab, you tab over to that position and you pull it down toward you to clear it. The way this operates is entirely the opposite direction from the Olivetti letter at 22s, just so you know. So there is a difference between the various models of Olivetti. So let's look at some of the features starting with the left side of the carriage back here. Of course, I mentioned earlier the folding carriage release lever. Now there is a problem I've understood that happens with these is this little protruding pin is what limits the travel, how far down the lever deploys, and if that starts to wear out, the lever will deploy too low, and when you move it across, it might scratch the case. There's no evidence of scratching yet, so mine hasn't really worn enough for that to happen. Here's your left-hand carriage or platen knob, and there's the release for the ratcheting. Releases the ratcheting. There is a 1 spacing, 2, 3, and 4 line spacing on the spacing selector, and then there's a 0 position up here. Now there's another peculiarity about these Olivetti machines, and it's true with this Olivetti Underwood 21, and it's also true with all 3 Olivetti Lettera 22s that I've owned, which is the markings stamped into the carriage advance or the line advance switch plate are not accurate. So again, as is the case with all the Lettera 22s I've owned, this one is stamped 1, 2, and 3, but it's actually 1, 1.5, or 2 line spacing. So it's really 1, 1.5, and 2, and you can test that by doing some line spacing tests and find out for yourself. But that is the case with that. So that's a little quirk with the Olivettis I've seen. There is a carriage lock lever, which is right here, and you lower it so that you can move the carriage back and forth. Turning to the back of the machine, you have the typical push and slide margin settings for the left and right margin, and there are 2 little flip-up paper supports like that. On either side of the carriage, you have a carriage release lever, so there's one on each side, which is very handy, and the one on the right has a nice little curve to it. On the right side now, you're going to have your platen tension release lever and your right side platen knob. One additional feature I wanted to point out to you is that along the very front edge of the carriage, just below where the paper feeds up from the roller, there is another paper scale. So this can help you, assist you in getting your paper lined up when you're first threading it in the machine. That's a handy feature I haven't seen on too many machines. And on the front, you're going to have a paper bale that is a kind of a flat style paper bale with engraved letterings for your positions of your paper that corresponds to the positions marked on back here on the paper scale back here. And it has the little metal grooved rollers to support the paper against the platen. It has the plastic paper shields that keeps the paper firmly pressed closer to the platen. So when you feed the paper into the machine, theoretically it should feed right underneath the rollers. So you don't have to lift up the paper bale to get the paper to feed in there. And there are little holes. There's two of them, two on each of the halves of the paper support here, that you can put a pen or pencil in, and you can draw vertical and horizontal lines. So let me just show you this. I'm using a mechanical pencil. I'm going to put this pencil in the hole, and I'm just going to move the carriage to the left. And you can see it makes a nice straight line. And then if you want to put it here and move the carriage knob, you can make a nice vertical line in your paper. So you can use this, or secretaries and typewriter operators, typists, use these back in the era of typewriters to make tables on their paper. Now, in typical Olivetti fashion, the ribbon cover pops off by pulling up on the front of it, and it slips off. And there are a set of protrusions on either side of the lid, and they have to slide in underneath these two arc-shaped curve things. You have to slide those two little levers underneath there first on the back, and you can clip the cover plate down into place. And what secures the cover plate in the front there's two little square protrusions on the front of the lid underneath, and they engage these two little springs in these slots to kind of hold it into place. The lid is metal. It is aluminum, cast aluminum, it appears like, and it has the Olivetti Underwood 21 label. So this is a workhorse machine. I have not kept it very clean. You can probably see it's kind of dirty looking. I've been using it a lot. It is a great typing machine. Mine has the original metal Olivetti style spools, and I believe I took the typewriter over to John Lewis's typewriter shop in Albuquerque, and he gave me, threaded up me a new ribbon on the old spools, which is kind of nice, a nice handy thing to do. So one other feature I wanted to point out to you is if you pull off the ribbon cover, and just in front of and outboard of the left ribbon spool is going to be a little adjustment setting for the touch. And there's 3 or 4 positions there. On this particular machine, I don't really feel much difference in the way it touches between one position or the other. And that has a lot to do with the linkages and whatnot in the mechanics of the machine. Probably need to be degreased and cleaned and re-lubed. So everything is hardened up enough that it's simply at the same level of touch. But it happens to be, for my purposes, a great feel, and I don't worry about the fact that this touch adjustment doesn't do much. When I get around to fully servicing this machine and degreasing it and relubing it, it'll probably come back to work a little bit more like it's supposed to. Now, if you're not familiar with Olivetti typewriters, there is one feature that I'd like to describe for you. And I always try to describe this for people because this is one of the few typewriters that has this feature. Let's say you're at the end of your paragraph and you want to do a carriage return and you want to indent the next paragraph, the start of the next paragraph. So normally you do a carriage return and you might have to use the tab key, or you might have to space 3 or 5 spaces in order to do your indenting. Well, the Olivettis have a special feature that does it automatically. When you're at the end of your previous line, the end of your previous paragraph, and you're going to do your carriage return and you want that first line to be indented, if you press and hold the margin release button, which enables you normally to type beyond the left or right margins, you hold down the margin release button, and then you do your carriage return, it will automatically stop and indent it 5 spaces from the left margin. So you don't have to go to the end and then space over or tab over for your indenting. Just push your margin release button and do your carriage return, and it stops already indented. And that is a great feature to these Olivettis. I love them. And now I'd like to show you another feature that these Olivettis have that is available on some other brands of machines. And this is called the half space feature. And the half space feature enables you to insert a missing letter into an already typed word or line. And so what I've done is I've typed a test phrase, test, test, and test. But I've missed in the middle word, I've missed one of the letters. So what I'm going to do is I would actually erase the 3 letters in the middle, and I would retype it in such a way that I can insert the 4th letter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the last letter of the previous line, and I'm going to hold the space bar down, release it, and then I'm going to hold the space bar and type the first letter T of that word. Release the space bar, press and hold, type the E. Release the space bar, press and hold, type the S. Release the space bar, press and hold, type the T. And the result is I've made enough room to fit that 4th letter in there, and that was normally missing. And the way this works is I'm actually taking a half space out of the gap between these 2 words and a half space out of the gap between these 2 words, and those 2 half spaces is making enough room to get for that extra letter to be fit in there. And the way you can tell that a machine is a half spacing machine, which gives you this ability to insert missing letters, is if you press the space bar down, the carriage moves a half space, and you release the space bar, and it moves the other half space. So it moves 1 half when you press it, and 1 half when you release it. And the same is true with all the letters. Well, let's thread up a sheet of paper in this machine and see how she types. So again, because of the way these 2 plastic guides keep the paper nice and curled closely to the platen roller, when you feed a piece of paper through there, it goes right underneath. The paper bale roller is nice and easy. So here we go. Quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And this is the full set of characters it types. There's your lowercase, and here is your uppercase. So it's a nice pica-sized font, and this particular sample of machine types quite well. I have a number of machines in my collection. I think 12 is the current count. I think I told you last video I had 11, but I recounted. I have 12. And that's what happens when you're a typewriter collector. You can't count them all. But a number of my machines are what I would call medium-sized portables. And usually your medium-sized portables are going to be really good for writing purposes, and I found that to be true with this one. Again, as evidenced by the story, in the backstory of this machine, the guy that traded a motorcycle for a typewriter back in the 60s. And so, yeah, this is a great writing machine. Another one of the machines very similar to this in terms of size and features is going to be the Olympia Sm9. I have the newer style, 1970s body style in a wide carriage in my collection, which we'll show you in a future video. Comparing both of those machines, at least the 2 samples I have, I prefer the Olivetti Underwood 21. I really like the touch on this machine. is better than the SM9. I'm not saying all SM9s are bad or all Olivettis are better than SM9s or Olympias. It's just that the two machines that I have, this happens to be nicer than that one in terms of the feel and touch. And so I've found that to be true with the only other SM9 I owned was a standard width Carriage in the 1960s body style with a techno font, squarish font. And it was a little bit better than the 1970s SM9 in terms of feel, but again, not as nice as this Olivetti Underwood 21. I will make another caveat. Comparing this Olivetti Underwood 21 to the three Olivetti Lettera 22s I've owned, which are smaller portables, this definitely has a better touch and feel than either of those three that I owned. And all three of those had slightly different feel and performance one to another, which I think is pretty normal for these complicated mechanical devices, because it has a lot to do with how well they were treated and how well they've been serviced over the years. There is some variability in the way they feel. But again, a great feeling machine. I would not hesitate to use this as my primary writing tool if this is what I had to use. So this is Joe Van Cleve with another episode of the Typewriter video series, and we'll be looking at another typewriter from my collection next time. Until then, you stay well and continue writing.